Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's been a minute since we've talked about the Cardinals losing to the same team in 2 consecutive games. Actually, it's been a month since we've been able to say that. The Cardinals lose back-to-back to finish off this series against the Detroit Tigers. And T-Bone, I didn't think they played poorly in this series. In fact, I thought they played pretty darn well. I think you can make a pretty strong argument. They should have won 2 out of the 3 games against the team that's been the best in baseball so far this year. And so while, yes, it does feel worse because they've lost 3 out of 4, they've lost 2 straight to the same team, again, for the first time in a month. Cardinals just finished a stretch of 3 straight series against teams that last year were in the postseason, that this year expects to be back into the postseason again. And in those games against Philly, Kansas City, and Detroit, I think you can make a pretty solid argument that the Cardinals were either better or equal to each of the 3 teams that they faced in those respective series. So I wanted to start out the show this way. What did we learn about the Cardinals in this stretch of 9 games against 3 legitimate playoff contenders in your mind?
I think you learned about the Cardinals. They can be a team that can compete for a playoff spot, and they can do it, in my opinion, in multiple facets, right? Like they can go up against the Philadelphia Phillies and win a slugfest against Aaron Nola, win a game in which it was just 14-7 your final score. You know, they're a team that's going to take advantage of your mistakes. Looking at that Royals game where you have Jonathan India bobble 1 ball, and then all of a sudden Herrera comes through and clears the bases, right?
And then India finds a way to bobble 6 more. Yes.
Yeah. And you see why the defense is so important for the St. Louis Cardinals. But then they can also win tight games, right? They win that second game in that Royals series 1-0. Though they lost the third and final game of that series 2-1, they were in it the whole time, and they just got beat. Their pitching, to me, has been one of the bigger surprises. Everything's been surprising, I should say, for this team, because their offense has been shocking, but their pitching, to me, continues to be very impressive. And they are a team that they've got the speed, they hit for average, they slug. It's quietly going under the radar, but they are a team that is top 10 in slugging percentage, and it's because of doubles, not home runs. And then they're just getting quality starting pitching consistently, and they play elite level defense. Like, they do everything at above average, I would say, and then they're elite defensively. I think you learned in this stretch, hey, this is a playoff caliber team. We'll see if they are able to get in, but I don't think they're going to be a team that I personally thought coming in here where it's a lock going into the deadline, they were going to be sellers.
Yeah, I think we have at times over the past really 3 or 4 seasons seen the Cardinals go up against playoff contenders, or certainly against playoff caliber pitching, and it's become increasingly clear over those seasons, okay, regardless of where this season goes, the Cardinals don't stack up. Like, the offense doesn't stack up against these high-level starters. The pitching just isn't quite there. They don't have any one specific thing that they do at an elite level, the way that right now, into 21, for what it's worth, they have been an elite defensive unit. There have just been too many times where you're like, man, they fall short when they go up against these real, legit playoff contenders. I didn't feel that way at any moment in this stretch of 9 games. Like, even today, we're recording this on Wednesday after the Cardinals lose 5-1 against the Tigers, and what was clearly probably the worst game of this 9-game stretch. They weren't like outclassed against Detroit. They had their chances. They just didn't execute. And it was the same thing in game 2 against Detroit. They just didn't execute. They had multiple chances, 6th inning, 8th inning. We'll get into those decisions a little bit later on in the show today, but they had their opportunities to come through. 2-1 loss against Philly, 2-1 loss against KC, had their chances. They just couldn't get the big hit. So at no point did I feel like they were outclassed by the opposition. And there were multiple points in each of those series where I felt as though they were outclassing the opposition. Game 1 against Detroit, the Cardinals absolutely slaughtered them. Same thing was true against Kansas City, Game 1. Same thing was true against Philadelphia, Game 3. You dominate the opposition at least one time in each of those 3 series, and I think that speaks to where this team is at. Mentioned this while we were doing BK and Ferrario earlier this week. The Cardinals have won, I think it's 13 games this year by at least 5 runs. At this point last season, that number was 2. And the reason why that's important is because what it allows you to do as a manager, it allows you to go to guys that are not just the high leverage relievers, which means guys like Phil Maton and Ryan Helsley and Kyle Leahy, they're more well rested. You can use somebody like Steven Matz in that game on Tuesday night to chase the game instead of having to use him out of desperation. The Cardinals just have placed themselves into a really good position. I know they're only 4 games over 500 right now, and you've got a bad taste in your mouth from the last couple of days. My biggest takeaway from these 9 games between the St. Louis Cardinals and 3 legitimate contenders, they are up to snuff against each and every one of those contenders that we've seen them play against so far this year.
And to your point on that pitching of, hey, look, your starters are going deep. Now you don't see the underbelly of the pen. You're also keeping these guys fresher, like Steven Matz, as you used the example as they did Tuesday night in that Tigers game. The other thing, too, is so they're preventing the snowball with their pitching right now. They are also creating the snowball for the other team. Like, you look at some of these series lately, they win that first game at Washington 10-0. Boom, Washington has to burn through some bullpen arms in that game. 10-3 in game 1 of that series against Royals. Okay, well, now the Royals have had to burn some bullpen arms. It didn't work this time around, but it was an opener for the Tigers. They tagged them, made it 11-4. They forced them to use a lot of arms throughout the series. Like, they are avoiding that snowball where you get that one bad start, and it is, okay, now we just burned a couple of our bullpen arms. Now we got to go through that bullpen train where we send guys down to Memphis, call guys back up. That has been very impressive for this team. And I'm with you. To me, they feel like when they lose, outside of today, I would say the 5-1 loss, it is not a non-competitive loss. It is a, we're in it, and you know what? Tip your cap, that team beat us. And that's going to happen in the playoffs, you would hope. And that's what's been encouraging for this young core here in St. Louis.
And I think a lot of that goes back to what they've done against this quality pitching that's been on their schedule this year. I'm going to read you a list of 16 pitchers, or 16 games that they've gone up against these pitchers. A couple of them they've seen multiple times. This is ridiculous. For them to face this caliber of pitching 16 different times through the first 50 games of the season, it's insanity. That's a third of your schedule so far. Here are some of these guys. Pablo Lopez, Walker Buehler, Paul Skeens, Aaron Nolan, Zach Wheeler, Framber Valdez and Hunter Brown from the Astros, Kodai Senga, Paul Skeens again, Mitch Keller, Mackenzie Gore, Christopher Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo, who's been one of the best pitchers in baseball this year, Aaron Nola again, Cole Reagans, Tarek Skubal. Those 16 pitchers or 16 games that I just mentioned, they totaled against the Cardinals 88 innings, 96 hits allowed, so more hits per inning than you typically would expect, 53 earned runs. That's good for a 5.5 ERA. Those guys that I just mentioned, the vast majority of them will finish the season somewhere around like a 3 to 3.5 ERA by the end of the year. They're that good, right? Some of them will have a down year, and like Nola, for example, he has not lived up to expectations, but by the time we get to the playoffs, I'd bet on that dude to be pretty darn good when we get there. This is not what we would typically expect from the Cardinals offense. The average start against them from those 16 games, 5 2/3 innings, 6 hits, 3.5 earned runs. The Cardinals are finding a way to be competitive and to get these guys out of the game earlier than you would otherwise expect. Same thing was true for Tarek Skubal earlier this week, just 5 2/3 innings. And even when they don't do like a ton of damage, they get 1, 2, 3 earned runs against these starters. They're keeping themselves competitive, and they're finding a way to get late into a game. You're like, all right, I think they're still kind of in it. And sometimes you can tell yourself that story as a fan, where like, I think the Cardinals are still in this game despite them being down 4-0. And then it never actually ends up coming to fruition, right? So you're watching the game, you're like, they're in it, they're getting all these opportunities, they're just not cashing in, they're going to cash in. This team is doing that. This team is actually getting late into games, down 3-1, down 4-0 like they were the other night, and they're finding a way to come back. Cardinals have scored 76 runs this year in the 7th through the 9th inning. That is 8th in Major League Baseball. They were down 4-0 against Skubal, bottom of the 3rd, tied it at 4 in the 7th. This team is finding ways to remain competitive throughout the game, and they're giving themselves multiple chances to be able to come back. And you add all this up, you look at what they've done against the quality opponents on their schedule, you look at the way that they've played just overall now for exactly 1 month since that New York Mets series, it's just not the same team that we saw early on. Better bullpen, amazing defense, really quality lineup right now. This is a good baseball team, and they're doing what a good baseball team should be doing against quality opponents.
Yeah, and I think the biggest change there is that bullpen that you talked about, right? We talked about it. I mean, it was Fernandez problem, and then some of the underbelly, right? Roycroft falls into that. Munoz falls into that. Kind of this happened today where the bullpen kind of let that game slip a little bit away, but not too much. And I wouldn't even put the game on them today, the underbelly of John King and Roycroft, because your offense just didn't come through. But we said, hey, if they can fix that problem, it feels like they might be able to turn it around. And they have. And to your point on like the offense against the quality pitching, they're just pesk, man. They are pest when they are at the plate. Like I had the numbers today on the show. 40, I think it was 48. It was either 46 or 48% of the pitches Skubal threw yesterday were to the top three guys in the order in Nootbaar, Wynn, and Donovan. It's unbelievable. Those guys giving the Cardinals competitive at-bats. And sometimes, sure, there are times where they will get to a starter. A lot of times when you go up against those quality guys, like a Skubal, Mackenzie Gore, Paul Skeens, Zach Wheeler, these type of pitchers that will be in the playoffs, it is not a battle, it is a war. And what I mean by that is, it is not just hell yeah, we're going up against these guys, we hope we get them for one inning. No, your job, sure, you want to try and score as many runs as possible on the guy. Odds are you're not doing that. What I mean by it's a war is it is a combined effort to work that guy's pitch count up and make sure you get him out of the game as quick as humanly possible. And the Cardinals did that in that game where they got Skubal out to where he wasn't able to get through 6 innings.
Yeah, and that's what they've been doing. Like they're finding ways. And each night is different, right? Some nights they've got the power. Like this is not a team that hits a bunch of home runs. They're probably not going to be a team that hits a lot of home runs. But the doubles, that puts pressure on the opposition. They are a team that goes first to third with regularity on a single. They are a team that just like consistently makes contact. They do not strike out very much. It feels similar now. They don't have the personnel of the team that I'm about to mention, and that's part of it. But it feels very similar approach-wise to what we have seen over the years from a team like the Dodgers, where they just work you to death, man. They just continuously put pressure on you. You're like, man, by the time you get done with the series, you're just mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. And I feel that way as a fan watching against the Dodgers. I can't imagine what it's like to actually play against that team. It has to be just miserable to experience that as a pitcher. So I've been really impressed by the Cardinals. I think they have earned our appreciation at this point. They have earned our respect at this point as we're now 50 games through the regular season. There's been nothing process or results-wise right now that is preventing me from really believing that this team could make some kind of a playoff push. However, that doesn't mean everything's perfect. This team does have some warts, and we're going to talk about some of those throughout the day today. We'll talk a little bit about the pitching and whether or not we're starting to see some cracks that could show up more often if they don't bolster this thing. We'll get into that coming up later on today. We will also discuss what we learned about the Cardinals roster and some decisions that might be necessary based on what Oli Marmol decided to do in Game 2 and Game 3 of this series against the Tigers. We'll talk about some of those decisions, what they mean for the Cardinals roster coming up next year on the Redbird Report. There were a couple of big decisions in Game 2 of the series against the Detroit Tigers that I think are worth revisiting because, T-Bone, it wasn't just about what Oli decided to do in the moment. It was also about what this says in regards to his feelings on certain players on the roster. So I know everybody focused for the most part on the pitching side of things. I actually thought Oli played it perfectly with his pitchers, his bullpen in Game 2 of the series against the Tigers. I liked that he was aggressive in getting Eric Fetty out of the game. I liked that he was willing to use Steven Matz for multiple innings. That should be his role. This is what he is capable of doing. It's a very unique role. There aren't a lot of guys like him in Major League Baseball right now, but I like the way that they utilized him. And then going to Leahy for the 9th inning after getting one out in the 8th, I thought all of it really played out about as well as it possibly could, and then it went poorly in the end. But I liked the process. I thought it looked good for them. What I did have some questions about was the pinch hitting situations, whether he did go with them or did not, and that's what I wanted to talk through with you. So there were 2 spots in particular that were worth honing in on. One was in the 6th inning. Cardinals had the bases loaded, 2 outs. They were down 4-3 at the time, and Pedro Pajes was walking to the plate. He was going up against Hannafy from the Tigers, and Hannafy on the season, prior to this at-bat, had a 1,200 OPS allowed to left-handed hitters and a 440 OPS allowed against right-handed hitters. Now, it's worth noting at the time, The Cardinals had Alec Burleson on the bench. Again, down 4-3. This is the 6th inning in game 2 of the series against the Detroit Tigers. The Cardinals decide to just go with Pages there. They didn't want to take him out of the game. They wanted his glove behind the plate to be able to continue to call things to keep that game close. Burleson, though, had an 805 OPS against righties. Pages had a 665 OPS against righties. It's a lot of numbers to basically tell you, hey, man, if you're just trying to maximize your production here, the obvious call, and I do mean that, obvious call here, if you're just going by the numbers, is Alec Burleson in this specific spot. This is how you deploy Alec Burleson. They chose not to do so. It didn't end up working out for them there. Pedro Pages, I think, grounded out weakly there in that to end that inning, and the Cardinals continue to be down 4-3. In the 8th inning, later on in that same game, Cardinals had another interesting spot. They decide to pinch hit Burleson for Walker, which I thought was the right call in that spot because you had to make sure that reliever that was in the game stayed in for Burleson. You had to make sure Burleson got in, otherwise Walker could have grounded out, and then Burleson never gets to see that situation. So Pages is once again up. You no longer have Burleson as a potential pinch hitter for him. He again hits for himself. The Cardinals had 2 on, 2 out, tied at 4. This guy has reverse splits, so he's actually better against lefties than he is against righties. And I didn't mind the decision there. Pages ends up lining out to center. It was a great play by Baez. He hit it on the screws. Really just like bad luck more than anything else in that spot. T-Bone, what I wanted to get to here, though, is the Cardinals decided not to use Nolan Gorman in that situation for Pedro Pages. And if Gorman was what he was supposed to be this year, that's an obvious pinch hit spot every day of the week. You go to Gorman there, and then you just go with Pozo behind the plate for the remainder of the game. They choose not to do so. And then in game 3, they have another big situation. 7th inning, down 3-1, runners on 2nd and 3rd, 2 outs against a left-handed pitcher coming into the game. And in that spot, you decide to use Pozo for Pages. So they had some interesting situations over the last couple of days, and I think it speaks to where this roster is at right now. T-Bone, if I was to advocate for something, I would make a change with this roster with 2 guys going down and 2 guys coming up. I don't think there's really any use at this point for Nolan Gorman. He has 2 starts in the past 10 games, 10 plate appearances in that stretch, 2 for 9, 2 strikeouts, 1 walk, no extra base hits. He's not hitting for any power again. And he's just not getting the playing time that's necessary. Eventually, you've got to worry about his timing. And I wonder if we're starting to see some of that play itself out at the major league level. Pozo also, I just don't know that you're getting the most out of him right now, or maximizing that spot on the roster, maybe is a better way to phrase this. 1 start in the last 9 games, took a pinch hit for Victor Scott down 3-1, 2 on, 2 out in game 3 against the Tigers, flied out to center field, burned Scott for the game. If that's your best right-handed bat off of the bench, I'm just not sure that's the one that you want to go to there. To me, I think the Cardinals have arrived where it's time to call back up Luken Baker. He got a bunch of at-bats while he was down in AAA. He was hot and cold, but while he was up at the big league level, he was your second best hitter on the season against left-handed pitchers. And if you're thinking about what are we using this spot on the roster for right now, whether it's Pozo or Luken Baker as it was earlier in the season, it's to pinch hit for left-handed batters late in a game against a lefty reliever. That's what he's here for, man. Luken Baker could do that job, and I believe do it better than Pozo, and that's not disrespect to Pozo necessarily. The other spot on this is with Gorman. I think you can better utilize that spot on your bench as well. People are going to cringe when I say the name, but I think Michael Ciani, it's time to bring him back up. Both of these guys with Baker and Ciani are just not players that I'm all that worried about sitting on the bench 6 days a week. It's not that big of a deal. They have a very specific role that they can play for you. Ciani can play a defensive replacement. He can be that guy for you. He can also be a pinch runner for you. This is not a team that does it very often, but he could fill that role capably if he needed to. Now, the downside to this is you don't have that third catcher. So if you have Ivan Herrera DH on any given day and something happens to Pages behind the plate, well, you lose your DH because Herrera is going to have to go back behind the plate. So be it, man. I'm willing to live with that to get Herrera's bat in the lineup every day and to maximize those final 2 spots on my roster. So this is the direction I would go. I would send Gorman and Pozo down. I'm not sure if they're ready to do that yet with Gorman, but this, in my opinion, would maximize your roster. Send Gorman and Pozo down and call up Ciani and call up Luken Baker. I think it's time to do so. T-Bone, how would you feel about that?
Yeah, so I don't mind the Gorman one because, I mean, it's clear, like, if you're not going to use him in that spot for Pages on Tuesday, and again, I don't even disagree with that. I think there may have been an argument to go to Pozo over Pages because I think his bat's better. But as here, I think the Gorman one makes sense. I think it probably is time. I think it's just time to, I don't want to say cut your ties with Gorman, but by sending him down, you're basically saying, hey, we don't think it's going to work with Gorman here in St. Louis. Because if he's not hitting for power, right now his on base is higher than his slugging percentage, which I really never thought I would see. I don't know how, one, he's not living up to what you thought he's going to be. Two, if you're not going to pinch hit for him, okay, that's fine. But three, where's his playing time coming? And that's the other thing. And Oli had said on KMOX the other day, hey, look, like we're trying to map this thing out. We're trying to figure out at-bats for Burleson and Walker and how we balance it. Well, how do you do that for Gorman? Like right now, it's like, what, once every 6 games, I would say? It probably is more valuable to send him down, give him some timing. See, maybe if he did this, it would be very small, but see if maybe he does build a little bit more value back up by turning the cover off the ball against AAA pitching. Because you're right. I think they could probably use another right-handed bat, and that is Luken Baker. Or if you wanted to do that one and bring up Ciani, like today, when they decide to pinch it for Scott, you pull him out of the game. Oli Marmol's thought process behind the Pies decision was, hey, we don't want to lose that defense, right? We don't want to lose that defense behind home plate. Well, I would argue there's better defensive value in center field with Victor Scott than there is Pages. And no offense to Barrero, but Barrero's a slightly above average defender in center field. Michael Ciani's elite, just like Victor Scott. So you wouldn't really lose a step if you called him up. I just don't know if they're going to be willing to do the whole get rid of the third catcher. Because, I mean, what has given us a sign yet in the, I don't know if it's fair to call it the Oli Marmol era or something that Mo doesn't want to do. But they have not shown a willingness to say, yeah, we will DH Ivan Herrera or whoever our catcher is and operate with just 2 catchers. They didn't really want to do that when they had Wilson Contreras behind the plate 2 years ago and especially last year as well. So I don't think they will make the Pozo move, which makes what you do with Gorman interesting. I think you probably need another right-handed bat. So I think the move they should be willing to do is the Gorman for Baker, and I just think they're going to continue to carry Pozo, but I don't know what his role is either.
That's the thing.
At this
so
point.
We're just carrying a 26-man just to have him?
Yeah.
Like,
And this goes to my criticism at times for the Cardinals, and I haven't necessarily felt this way. I guess I have felt this way at times this year, but like I could kind of understand how you got there because it's all about runway. It's all about runway. But now that you're holding your own against playoff caliber teams, it feels like we're getting close to that pivot from it's about runway to, okay, we'll do a little of the runway, but we're ready to start really pushing and trying to win baseball
The runway
games.
starts. Once you get into the 7th inning or later, especially, and you've got leverage situations, now it's about winning.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree with that. But the reason that I bring that up is, well, okay, now that you are doing that, if you are going to decide to go with it is about winning, then you should maximize the 26-man roster. And at times, I'd say since 2023, I have felt like they've been playing with 24 guys at times, right? Like 23 was, well, Taylor Motter's here. Okay, well, what's Taylor Motter's role? To sit the bench. Okay, but don't we need, like, I understand, like, maybe it is just one specific spot. Motter never had a role for that.
I didn't think they had a player, though, that made more sense for that team. Like, I did not have this criticism in the Taylor Motter era because I wanted somebody to literally not do anything. Like, that role on the team was to sit on the bench because they didn't have anybody necessarily that you were going to pinch hit for. And when they did, it was like a very clear platoon between 2 guys. And there wasn't necessarily like a whole lot of pinch running situations. Like that team was constructed in a way, if I remember correctly, where they didn't necessarily have a need for that 26th man, and they didn't have anybody that projected to be a specific skill set as that 26th man. This team does. This team does have that need and those players, and you can switch it up over time if you want to. Like the Pozo thing I find to be really interesting because really a lot of this is about how do you view his bat? How do you value his bat? If they think Pozo is just, hey, a replicate version of Luken Baker, and he's going to give you the same production as a bat as Luken Baker would at the big league level. I mean, some of the production at the big league level would suggest, yes, that is exactly the case. But in that scenario, I think you need to be more aggressive in deploying him then. Like, I think he is somebody, if you view him that way, that you should utilize more often. He could be a pinch hitter in these big time situations. I would also add like Siani for Gorman. That is the one that I'm really kind of advocating for here. Like I think there's now a role for Siani on this team. And whether it be for Pozo's pinch hit situations or for Lucan Baker's pinch hit situations, a lot of those could come for Victor Scott late. That's really what we're talking about here. Victor Scott and Alec Burleson are the two guys that you don't necessarily want seeing lefties late in a game. So if you're going to take Scott out the way that they did today, you'd rather have Siani in there. If you're going to do this for Alec Burleson, well, I kind of want to, if I'm going to hit for them, it's probably a big spot. There's a decent chance I'm going to want a pinch runner after one of Lucan Baker or Pozo ends up in the game. So I think a lot of this just leads me to, I think it's time to make the switch, man. I agree with you. This team has done enough to earn the opportunity to see how good it is, see how good the 40-man roster is. They utilize a bunch of different pitchers over the course of the season. They're not afraid to do that. Sometimes it takes a week or two longer than we would like for a guy like Fernandez, maybe Roy Croft to go down, but they typically get there. The Gorman decision, I think, will be very indicative of where this team is at right now. He's not getting playing time up here. At a certain point in time, your actions are speaking every bit as loudly as your words are. He's lost his job to Burleson. He's lost any starting opportunities to Burleson or to Ivan Herrera or to Brendan Donovan. They value Pedro Baez's glove behind the plate at this point so much. There's just not going to be many opportunities here for him. So I think it's time, and you've got a chance here over the next 3 series to really make some hay. Arizona's a good team. They've got a great offense. We'll get into that later. But Baltimore and Texas have been struggling, man. And these are teams that you should be able to get some wins against. You just showed it against quality opponents over the last 2 weeks or so. Keep it going and give yourself the best chance to do it with this off day on Thursday. Make the move for Friday.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people too, and I'll throw this out here, I think a lot of people that are listening to this may also say, well, if you want to maximize your 26-man roster, then you need to send down Jordan Walker, right? And here's where I will say the difference is, even though I've been advocating that, hey, Walker's time should be getting closer to an end in terms of his runway than what Gorman is at. The difference is Jordan Walker has taken 792 plate appearances before today's game, before Baseball Reference has updated. Nolan Gorman has taken over 1,200. That is a significant difference, and I think you've gotten to the point where it is okay to finally come to a conclusion and say, you know what, Nolan Gorman just not going to be the guy that we thought he was going to be. I think that's okay, and I think, and maybe he does go somewhere else, like maybe in the offseason they move on from him and they trade him and they get like a reliever or something. You know what? If it doesn't work out, if it works for him somewhere else, then good for Nolan Gorman, right? You gave him every opportunity here in St. Louis. This isn't another Randy Arozarena situation. This isn't like an Adolis Garcia where it was all these guys didn't get opportunities. He's had 1,200 plate appearances across 4 seasons. If he's not hitting now, what is the sign that says he's going to turn it around here in St. Louis?
That's the other thing that I would say. Like, Walker, while not producing, has been better than Nolan Gorman this year. It's a low bar to clear, but he has found a way to do so. So there's not a whole lot there to suggest like this is a dude that you need to keep around. The other thing, like maybe he goes down and he does figure out his timing, because it's not happening here. That's for sure. He's not getting the opportunities to do that here. You might as well switch something up and see what it looks like for him down at the minor league level. I did want to bring up one other thing. If they don't do this prior to the Diamondback series, they don't end up making the switch with some of these position players, it's probably because the Diamondbacks basically have one lefty reliever. Like everybody else out of their bullpen is throwing from the right side. Now he's a good one, but when you only have one guy that has the potential to beat you coming out of the pen as a lefty, I wonder if they maybe switch that up a little bit prior to that series to the Diamondbacks. But if that remains the case, there's a even stronger argument to go ahead and stick with what you've got right now. There's a ton of right-handed relievers coming out of the pen, and you can deploy those left-handed bats coming off of the bench.
Even then, though, like based on what they did, like who's he pinch hitting for, right? Because like if you're saying Walker, first call's Burley,
yeah,
you're not pinch hitting for Scott against a righty.
Really, that would be a reason not to do the Lucan Baker move.
Sure,
he would not have a role in that series most likely, so keep him down in AAA for the next 4 days, and then
for Siani one. Like
sure, that one I think makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Because otherwise, like you're not pinch hitting for Scott in that situation. Clearly, if you're gonna carry 3, and again, I think they're gonna carry 3 catches. They value Paz defense too much to where they wouldn't pinch hit for him. So to me, the Gorman Ciani, you're probably right. Gorman Ciani makes more sense against all the righties from Arizona. I don't know what I don't know what they would say to, hey, here's why we have to keep it as is right now with the roster.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. So we did mention that the Cardinals have the Arizona Diamondbacks coming up. The Cardinals have a unique thing going on right now with them, which is they have the best defense in baseball. And by some metrics, they're on pace to be the best defense in baseball over the last decade. That does change the way that you view the pitching. It makes you view them in more of a shiny light, right? They look really good so far this season. Can that continue, though? Is this really going to be the best defense that we have seen in the last decade in Major League Baseball? And if not, what does that mean for the starting pitching? They have a really good test for that coming up against Arizona. We'll talk about that on the other side here on the Redbird Report. The St. Louis Cardinals are currently 28th in Major League Baseball in strikeout rate. T-Bone, they're tied for that spot with the LA Angels, not a team that you'd like to be mentioned with. Now, even worse, the only two teams that are below the Cardinals when it comes to their strikeout rate are the Chicago White Sox and the Colorado Rockies. Again, very much not the grouping that you want to be with. And this is not just the Cardinals rotation. This is the rotation plus the bullpen. So strikeout rate has not been there for the Cardinals this year. That's not surprising. You look at their rotation, they've got three guys that don't have really swing and miss stuff. You look at the bullpen, and they have a few guys that are good in that regard, but very few that are exceptional outside of basically Ryan Helsley. So this is a pitching staff that relies, once again, classic Cardinals, this is a pitch to contact staff. And that can look really good when you have the best defense in baseball. And right now, that's what the Cardinals are boasting. You look at them in outs above average on the season, they're at plus 27. 27 more outs than your average baseball club would have recorded so far this year. That means they're on pace this year for the most outs above average of any baseball team since they started tracking that statistic a decade ago. I asked Oli Marmol about this earlier this week, and he said, I bleep and hope we break that record. So he certainly would like to see his team capable of doing that. It's just not an easy thing to do. Typically, you see something like this and you're like, all right, well, they're a really good defensive team. I totally buy that. They're probably not going to be the best one of the last decade. And even if they are, they're probably not going to break it by like 30 outs above average. That's going to regress a little bit. And the unfortunate byproduct of the defense being great, but not all time, is the pitching looks a little worse. I think you saw that to some degree in Game 3 against Detroit, where you saw Andre Palante. It wasn't a bad game by him necessarily, but you just saw a few of those, like Jordan Walker up against the wall. Doesn't quite make that catch, right? You see another one where later in the game, I think it was Roycroft comes in and he's getting hit around a little bit. Some of those would have been caught a week ago. Just batted ball luck. It happens, you know? So how do you view this for the Cardinals pitching, T-Bone? How much of a concern do you think this is if you're a Cardinals fan right now?
So I think it's fair, like on a scale of 1 to 10, to be at like maybe 4. I think that's because that's where I am. Look, there is going to be some regression because when you are pitching to contact, you are playing the BABIP game. Are we going to be lucky or not today? But I think when you're talking about your luck, I do believe that some of the luck the Cardinals are creating is they are creating it themselves with their defense, right? Sure. And that's where I look at this and I say, sure, there's probably going to be some games where Walker, instead of making that catch, leaps up and I think he caught it and it came out of the glove as his hand came down. There's going to be games where that happens. And when that does happen, you're going to need your offense to pick you up a little bit, and they weren't able to today. I don't think, though, it's going to be in a slump. And what I mean by that is I don't think this is going to be something that you look up and you go, boy, for 10 straight games, the Cardinals defense just hasn't made that big play. I think they're going to make big plays in that stretch. There's probably like 2 games in that stretch where you look at it and go, boy, they didn't come up with the big play, or boy, the hits were just finding holes here today. And that's why, like, though I do agree there probably is some regression coming, I don't think it's going to be a lot that it's going to kind of cave in on this pitching staff. I think this pitching staff is going to ultimately be fine. I think they are going to be about 10 to 15-ish, I would say, in terms of ERA. I don't think the starting pitching is going to be top 10 and can continue to eat up innings like this. But if you're 15th in 10 to 15 in pitching, while you've also got a top 10 offense, that's a playoff caliber team. And you can also upgrade that when you get to the trade deadline if you choose to be a buyer. So I get some of the concerns that are being raised by it. And I am a pro swing and miss guy. I am all in on, hey, you should be building a rotation that's like the Phillies, where everybody's got swing and miss. You're not that, though. But you have elite defense to help offset that. So I am at a 4, I would say, on the scale of 1 to 10 of how concerned I am about it.
This is such a classic Cardinals pitching staff because they
100%.
also get ground balls. Like, that's part of the conversation here is it's not just, they're getting a bunch of batted ball luck. Yeah, but some of that is like they're preventing a single from being a single, more so than it is they're preventing a double from being a hit. Right. And there is some of that. Don't get me wrong. Like, Victor Scott has taken away a number of doubles this year. Jordan Walker has been really good defensively in right field as well. And he's taken away doubles, maybe even a triple today. He stopped a ball, which could have been a triple, and it ended up being a single because of the play that he made in the outfield. So that stuff is happening. I don't want to suggest that it's not. But man, when you have the 4th best ground ball rate in Major League Baseball, it does prevent some of this because it's really hard to string together a bunch of those singles time and time and time again. So as long as they keep their slugging percentage against down, I think they'll probably be okay in this regard. It is something that makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm not like overwhelmingly concerned. Let me put it this way. We are now, let's call it 3 weeks since the Cardinals started this winning stretch, right? Since that New York doubleheader. How many times in this 3-week stretch do you think the Cardinals have allowed more than 5 runs?
So
I think with this offense, you can pretty consistently expect them to score 4 or 5 runs. That's about what their average has been this year.
I feel like they haven't done it a lot, so 3?
1.
That's impressive.
The Cardinals have allowed more than 5 runs once in their last 17 games. So, yes, the defense has been great in this stretch, and that's part of it. But also, man, the pitching's just pretty good. Like, it's not that they're overwhelming, but Eric Fedde wasn't overwhelming last year either. And guess what? He finished with a sub-4 ERA. Miles Mikolas has never been overwhelming with his stuff. But there have been times in his career where, because of the contact that he induces, it's very soft, it's ground balls all the time, he finds a way to get a sub-4 ERA. Andre Pallante is the most severe ground ball pitcher in Major League Baseball this season, and it has been for the last 2.5 years now. That's just a guy that you can kind of consistently know what you're getting out of, and with this infield, where you have Mason Wynn, maybe the best shortstop in baseball, Nolan Arenado, who has reverted back to form in a good way as a defender, and Wilson Contreras, who's been great over at first, and I haven't mentioned Brendan Donovan, who might win the Gold Glove at second base, or is at least going to be up for it this year. I trust that staff to find a way through it. It makes me nervous in a playoff setting because the batted ball luck is just individual settings and that can go against you in a moment. But over the course of 162, I think this defense is going to be able to make up for that. And I think the offense is good enough to propel you to a potential playoff spot.
Yeah, I don't think this formula for October will get you very far. But for the Cardinals, getting to October would be a win. So that's where I'm like, okay, well, right now I view this as a plus.
100%.
But I'll ask you this, when you say nervous about how this is formulated, is it, okay, you're going to run out of luck? Is it, hey, some guys may not just be able to make some of these big plays? Because the one thing that I would say where it would make me nervous is they've been very healthy so far.
That's one of my things that I am curious about.
And
what this looks like when you lose one of those elite defenders, if you lose one of those elite defenders.
And that is where, this is a very fragile build, though I think it is sustainable because I'm not counting injuries when I say that. But if you did lose I don't know if it was Victor Scott, because you could go elite again with Michael Ciani, but if Mason Wynn, who's been on the IL once this year for just 10 days, right? It was just a back injury. 10 days you can survive without him. If he were out, and knock on wood that this doesn't happen, if he were out for 2 months, you're in trouble.
What does this team do if Arenado goes down?
I don't know.
That's one to me that I really think about a lot because your answer there is let's go through this real quick. Do you think they would go with Sajaci or Gorman if they ended up losing Arenado for, let's call it 2 weeks? Who do you think gets that starting nod?
My cop-out answer would be they'd platoon it. They would platoon, left would be Sajaci,
Sure.
Right would be Gorman.
Makes sense.
I think right now they would give Gorman the first run at it. If you said, hey, don't take the cop-out answer of a platoon, I'd say they'd probably go Gorman. I think they would say the season was about runway. the upside on Gorman, I don't know if they still view it this way, but like if you're going on what you originally thought Gorman was, the upside on him to me is a little bit higher than Sajasi. He has pure power.
I would lean Sajasi. Like if I had that situation presented to me, this is not me answering for what the Cardinals will do, but if BK was managing the roster, first of all, we'd be horrific. It would be awful. But I would say, yes, this is about runway. And the guy that I'm giving the runway to is the really young former top 100 prospect that has produced in the year 2025. And that guy is Thomas Sajasi. I don't know if he is as good defensively at third as Gorman, but I don't know that there's going to be a significant drop-off. It's not like Gorman is like a potential Gold Glover at second or third base. You could also do a situation where, hey, Donnie, you're kicking over to third. We're going to have Sajasi play at second for us right now if you wanted to go about it that way. I think I would go with Sajasi there, but that's a total aside. That is something that does make me a little nervous, though, is the defense. If you lose somebody for an extended period of time, what does that do? When really all of this is built on, we have 0 below average defenders on the field at any given time, and that's what maximizes the potential of this pitching.
And it could be, too, like an injury, for example, like would be, it wouldn't just be like, oh, like you use the third base one of, do you call somebody up or do you go with the guy that's on your bench? There's trickle-down effects everywhere, right? Like Jordan Walker right now. If Walker got hurt, okay, sure, you have the replacement of, hey, well, we'll go with Brendan Donovan out in the outfield. Well, I would argue Donovan's probably, just weird to say, I think Donovan's probably a slightly worse defender than Jordan Walker out in the outfield.
Agreed.
But then also it's at second base. Like, Thomas Sajasi was okay at second base defensively. Gorman, I think, is okay. It just takes one piece to fall apart, and then suddenly the defense will look like a Jenga board, right? It looks great right now. You pull out that one wrong piece, that thing could topple down, and it wouldn't just, that would affect both what you do defensively and what the metrics would tell us about that and their goal to meet the outs above average record. It would also really send their pitching potentially into a spiral. That's why, like, to me, this is sustainable, but it would take one injury for me to very much panic about what the rotation would be.
I'm fascinated to see. And we've had a few really interesting series in a row here. Like, even the Washington series I found to be interesting because you went up against a couple of really good arms, most notably in Mackenzie Gore. But the last three have been great. Like Philly, KC, Detroit, you have learned real tangible things about the Cardinals in those three series. I think Arizona is going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
Because in each of these series, you've had something being tested. In Kansas City, the offense was tested against their pitching staff. Against Philly, it was both the test of your offense, but also, hey man, look at these dudes that are going up against you on the other side. And you had some lefties in there. It was a really fun matchup. In Detroit, same thing. I thought that was a great test for the Cardinals pitching staff. This is a huge test for the Cardinals pitching. The Arizona Diamondbacks are like a classic, like the Detroit Lions a couple of years ago. If you were playing fantasy football, everybody wanted to find guys that were either on the Lions or against the Lions because their defense was so bad and their offense was so good that it just made for everybody's going to get 1 million fantasy points in this game, right? Because there's going to be 100 yards for every receiver. There's just going to be points everywhere. That's every Arizona Diamondbacks game so far this season. Like they don't pitch it well. They are one of the top 3 offenses in baseball. They're only behind this year the Dodgers and the Yankees. They're third in Major League Baseball in OPS this season. Like, let me read you some of their recent scores of their games, just for context on this, okay? 14-11, 8-1 loss, 10-6 loss, 8-7, 14-12, 9-5. Those are all within the last 10 days.
Wasn't one of those series against the Colorado Rockies, who aren't very good?
Correct. That was a 14-12 loss that they had. That was at home, not at Coors Field. Their pitching has been really bad this year, which is weird because they have names that you've heard of, like Burns, Gallen, Kelly, Fott. Those are 4 names that should be performing better than they have been. And yet, here we are. But what has worked for them is the offense. The offense has been great so far this year. As a team, they are slugging .451. This is a team that you have to worry about. Though that slug that I was talking about, this is where it could happen. They hit line drives all over the yard. Corbin Carroll has found himself. He was really bad early on last year. He has an OPS of nearly 1,000 so far this season. He has 6 triples already, 15 home runs already this season. This is an offense that can take advantage of a pitch-to-contact type of a staff.
Yeah, this will be very much a test for their rotation, and like you'll get a good sense of it on Friday in that first game because Michaelis is going. So I'll be curious to see how they try and line this up. You know, the reason I say that is like we've seen they've been kind of going 2 out of every 3 for Jordan Walker, and they're trying to balance Alec Burleson playing time as well. I say that because, like, with Michaelis on the mound, you probably can't put Burley in, even though you probably like that lefty matchup a little bit against Zach Gallen. So it'll be curious to see how the defense holds up. I'm more curious to see how it will hold up for the bullpen, because it kind of works out a little bit in the Cardinals' favor of, hey, your 2 best swing and miss guys, Liberatore and Gray, are going in this series. So now Liberatore's is good. It's not great, but the bullpen's the one that, okay, if you get to that underbelly, will the defense make the big plays and keep this game close? Because you're right. Offensively, you should be able to put up some runs against them. Your pitching is the one that will be really tested against the Diamondbacks.
Do you think we see Herrera behind the plate in 2 of these 3 games? Because that's how you get Burleson's bat into the lineup. Maximizing your lineup plus defense, the way to do that probably is with Herrera catching 2 of the 3 games, I would think. And in those scenarios, you can have Burleson as your designated hitter on those 2 days. Do you think that's something they would consider? Because they just saw him today behind the plate against Detroit. You have the off day. Maybe you don't put him back behind the plate on Friday against or with Michaelis on the mound. You go back to back with the day games for him. That's probably the way that you would best maximize your team. But you also have some potential threats on the base paths, and that's not what you want with him behind the plate.
Yeah, that's why I'm...
It'd be an intriguing decision by Oli Marmol.
I'm leaning towards they'll stick with what they've been doing, which is 2 out of 3 will be Pages, 1 will be either Herrera or Pozo. I'm assuming Herrera, because that's what they've been doing, because Arizona's 9th in stolen bases coming into the day. And like you said,
power and speed.
Yeah.
That's what this team has been.
They really don't want Herrera to be caught in that situation. It's going to be a hell of a series, because, I mean, you mentioned their pitching. Though it's not working, that is the staff that I envisioned building, because it does have swing and miss, but for some reason it's just not working.
Yeah. Like that Fott day, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say you're probably going to see Alec Burleson in right field on that day.
Yeah, that's not a great matchup for Jordan Walker.
It's not a good matchup at all. So we'll see what they decide to do there. It's been a really intriguing, really month to watch Cardinals baseball. I expect that to continue. The Cubs have a cupcake schedule for the next month, so the Cardinals have to find a way to just keep pace. You don't have to go out there and do what you did where you go on this crazy winning streak. Just stay competitive. Stay in this thing. Give yourself a fighting chance. You will see the Cubs coming up here in just about a month for the first time, and that's where you could potentially make your move. You've got, I think it's 7 games against the Cubs over the course of 2 weeks. That's where things get really interesting for them within this division. It's been a lot of fun to talk with you guys today here on the Redbird Report. We'll be back again next week here on the show. So for Tanner Hendrickson and Zane, who does a fantastic job for us behind the scenes on the video component of this thing, I'm Brandon Kiley. Please rate, subscribe, and review us on YouTube. Do so on the Apple Podcast feed as well. Check us out on 101ESPN.com. It's all available for you. This has been the Redbird Report. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.